Jasmine Washington's champagne glass shattered on the floor of the first-class cabin as she stared at the flight attendant who had just addressed her as the help. The entire cabin fell silent. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone. "Get me the board. Now, I'm buying the whole airline." Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you enjoy stories about people getting what they deserve, hit that like button and subscribe to catch more jaw-dropping tales of justice. Now, let's see how this shocking situation unfolded. Jasmine Washington adjusted her Armani suit jacket as she waited in the priority boarding line at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. At 40 years old, the CEO of Washington Enterprises had built her reputation on making smart, strategic business decisions. Today's flight to New York was crucial. She needed to finalize the acquisition of a major logistics company that would expand her business empire even further. First-class passengers may now board, announced the gate agent, barely glancing at the travelers as they moved forward. Jasmine stepped up, presenting her boarding pass and ID. The gate agent scrutinized her documents longer than necessary, looking from the pass to her face several times. "This is a first-class ticket," the agent said, her tone implying a question. "Yes, it is," Jasmine replied evenly, maintaining her composure despite the obvious implication. After another moment of hesitation, the agent reluctantly scanned the boarding pass and returned it. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Washington." Jasmine had experienced this countless times, the subtle questioning of her presence in spaces typically dominated by white executives. As she made her way down the jetway, she straightened her shoulders, a habit formed over years of entering rooms where she was the only black woman. "Welcome aboard," greeted a flight attendant at the aircraft door, her smile dimming slightly as she took in Jasmine's appearance. "Your seat is to the right." Jasmine nodded, walking toward the first-class cabin. Finding seat 1 Ampere, she stored her designer briefcase in the overhead compartment and settled into the plush leather seat by the window. A white flight attendant with a name tag reading Melanie Parker approached her, practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Can I see your boarding pass, please?" Jasmine had already tucked it into her bag but retrieved it without comment. This was the second time her presence in first class had been questioned in less than 10 minutes. Melanie studied the boarding pass thoroughly. "Thank you, Miss Washington. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" Before Jasmine could respond, a middle-aged white man in an off-the-rack suit took seat 1B beside her. "Good afternoon, sir." Melanie's demeanor instantly warmed. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Thompson. Would you care for a pre-departure beverage? Perhaps champagne or sparkling water?" "Scotch neat," he replied without looking up from his phone. "Right away, Sir." Melanie beamed, turning away without acknowledging Jasmine's presence again. Bradley Thompson finally looked up, noticing Jasmine. He seemed surprised to find her in the seat next to his. "First time in first class?" he asked, with a condescending smile. "No," Jasmine replied, simply taking out her tablet to review documents for her upcoming meeting. "Let me guess," Bradley continued, undeterred by her brevity. "Company upgrade, diversity program. Those are great initiatives. My company has one too." Jasmine took a deep breath, reminding herself that responding would only waste energy she needed for her meeting. "I fly first class regularly, Mr. Thompson." "Oh, sure," he nodded, unconvinced. "I'm Bradley Thompson, VP at Skyline Airways. Been in the airline business 20 years. Melanie returned with Bradley's scotch, placing it carefully on his armrest, along with a hot towel and mixed nuts. She turned to leave without offering Jasmine anything. "Excuse me," Jasmine called. "Could I get a glass of champagne and a hot towel as well?" Oh, Melanie seemed flustered. "Of course. I'll be right back with that." From across the aisle, another passenger, a middle-aged white man, loudly remarked to his seatmate, "These affirmative action hires are taking over everything these days. Can't even enjoy first class anymore without the diversity police forcing companies to promote unqualified people." The man who Jasmine would later learn was named Derek Foster made no attempt to lower his voice. Several passengers chuckled in agreement. Jasmine maintained her composure, though her grip on her tablet tightened. She'd faced this throughout her career, the assumption that her achievements came from anything but merit. As the only black female CEO in her industry, she was accustomed to being underestimated. Her mind drifted to her childhood in Chicago's South Side, where her mother had worked 3 jobs after her father's sudden death when Jasmine was 12. Despite their financial struggles, her mother had instilled in her an unshakable belief in her own potential. "You're twice as good as they are, Jasmine," her mother would say, "which means you'll have to work twice as hard to get half as far. But baby, you're gonna soar so high, they'll get dizzy watching you." That determination had earned Jasmine a full scholarship to Yale, where she'd graduated summa cum laude before obtaining her MBA from Harvard. Even there, among the elite, she'd faced constant assumptions that she didn't belong, that her presence was merely to fulfill some quota. The plane began boarding its remaining passengers. Melanie eventually returned with Jasmine's champagne, placing it on her armrest without the hot towel or nuts that Bradley had received. "We're out of hot towels," she explained curtly before hurrying away to attend to other passengers. As the boarding completed and the safety demonstration began, Jasmine noticed that Bradley was already on his second scotch, while her champagne remained untouched. She had learned long ago to never drink on business trips, another adaptation to a world where she couldn't afford the slightest perception of unprofessionalism. The plane pushed back from the gate, and Jasmine gazed out the window at the Atlanta skyline. She thought about how far she'd come from that apartment in Chicago, and how much further she still planned to go. Despite achieving more than most people could dream of, she still faced the same prejudices, just in more expensive surroundings. As they took off into the clear blue sky, Jasmine had no idea that this routine business trip was about to become anything but routine. Once the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign turned off, Jasmine retrieved her laptop to prepare for tomorrow's meeting. The acquisition of Meridian Logistics would be a game changer for Washington enterprises, expanding their supply chain capabilities across 3 continents. She needed to review the final financial projections and contingency plans. "That's a nice computer," Bradley commented, peering over at her high-end laptop. "Let me guess, company issued." Jasmine nodded slightly without looking up, hoping her curtness would discourage further conversation. "I should tell you about diversification strategies." Bradley continued, misinterpreting her focus for inexperience. "Most minorities, diverse executives, don't understand the nuances of vertical integration." He launched into an explanation of basic business principles that Jasmine had mastered in her first year of business school. She continued typing, trying to tune him out. "It's really quite complex, but I'm happy to mentor someone like you," he offered magnanimously. "My company has a diversity initiative where I volunteer to guide promising minorities through the corporate ladder. Not that they always have the aptitude, but it's important to try." After 15 minutes of his unsolicited mentoring, Jasmine finally reached for her noise-canceling headphones. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Thompson, but I need to prepare for my meeting." Bradley's expression soured. When Melanie passed by a moment later, he flagged her down. "Melanie, my seatmate here is being rather rude. I was just trying to help her understand business basics." Melanie looked at Jasmine with disapproval. "Miss Washington, we encourage our passengers to be courteous to one another. First class is meant to be a pleasant experience for everyone." "I'm trying to work," Jasmine explained calmly. "I have an important meeting tomorrow." "Well, perhaps you could be a bit more appreciative when a seasoned executive offers advice," Melanie suggested with a tight smile. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Thompson? Another scotch, perhaps?" "That would be perfect, Melanie. You always take such good care of me," Bradley replied, shooting a smug look at Jasmine. "And for you, Miss Washington?" Melanie asked, as an afterthought. "Water, please," Jasmine requested, returning to her work. 20 minutes passed, and while Bradley received his third scotch, Jasmine's water never arrived. She pressed the call button, which remained lit for nearly 10 minutes before Melanie finally responded. "Yes," she asked, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "I ordered water some time ago," Jasmine reminded her. "Right, we've been very busy." "I'll bring that right out," Melanie replied. When lunch service began, Bradley was served first a steaming plate of grilled salmon with seasonal vegetables. When Jasmine finally received her meal 15 minutes later, the chicken was cold and the sauce had congealed. "Sorry about that," Melanie said insincerely. "These things happen." As Jasmine tried to eat her unappetizing meal, the plane hit a patch of turbulence. Her water glass tipped over, spilling across her lap and onto her designer suit. Melanie rushed over with napkins for Bradley, whose drink had merely sloshed, while barely acknowledging Jasmine's more significant spill. "These things happen," she repeated, tossing a single cocktail napkin toward Jasmine before moving on. Jasmine dabbed at the water stain on her $2,000 suit, acutely aware of the whispers and stares from nearby passengers. Some people just aren't used to the finer things, she overheard Melanie telling another flight attendant in the galley. These people don't know how to behave in first class. The cabin lights dimmed briefly as the captain made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Richard Sullivan. We're experiencing some light turbulence, but we should be through it shortly. We want to thank all of our valued passengers for choosing Atlas Airlines today." A few minutes later, Captain Sullivan emerged from the cockpit for a brief walk through the cabin. He stopped beside Bradley's seat with a warm smile. "Brad Thompson, good to see you again. How's everything at Skyline? Still giving us a run for our money," he chuckled, engaging in friendly banter. "Richard, you old dog. Things are great. Hey, have you met Bradley?" gestured vaguely toward Jasmine without actually introducing her. Captain Sullivan glanced at Jasmine with embarrassed acknowledgement before returning his attention to Bradley. "We should grab a drink next time you're in Atlanta. The usual club." "Absolutely," Bradley agreed. Captain Sullivan returned to the cockpit without having said a single word to Jasmine. The contrast in treatment couldn't have been more stark. Bradley was treated like a valued friend, while she might as well have been invisible. As the flight continued, Jasmine tried to focus on her work, but the accumulation of slights and indignities made concentration difficult. Every interaction seemed designed to remind her that despite her achievements, despite her first-class ticket, despite her position as a CEO, many people would always see her skin color first and her credentials second, if at all. 3 hours into the flight, Jasmine needed to use the restroom. She gathered her phone and stood up, making her way toward the first-class lavatory at the front of the cabin. A small occupied sign illuminated the door, so she waited patiently in the small alcove between the lavatory and the cockpit. After several minutes, Melanie approached her. "The first-class lavatory is out of order," she said, though Jasmine had just seen another passenger exit it moments before. "You'll need to use the facilities in economy." "I just saw someone use this one," Jasmine pointed out. Melanie's smile tightened. "It's just been reported as malfunctioning. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." Rather than create a scene, Jasmine made her way back through the cabin toward economy class. She noticed Bradley using the supposedly out-of-order first-class lavatory as soon as she turned away. The walk to economy felt like a journey through different social strata. As she passed through the premium economy section, then into the main cabin, the seats grew narrower, the legroom more restricted. By the time she reached the economy lavatories, there was a line of 4 people waiting. "Excuse me," a young mother with a crying toddler said, recognizing Jasmine's first-class attire. "Aren't you in first class? You have your own bathroom up front?" "Apparently, it's out of order," Jasmine explained with a small smile. The woman looked confused. "That's weird. My husband just used it when he took our son up there 10 minutes ago." After waiting nearly 15 minutes, Jasmine finally used the cramped economy bathroom. As she washed her hands, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The confident, powerful CEO, momentarily replaced by a woman who, despite her success, still had to navigate spaces where her belonging was constantly questioned. On her way back to first class, she was stopped by a male flight attendant she hadn't seen before. His name tag read Kyle Brooks. "Excuse me, miss," he said, blocking her path. "First-class passengers only beyond this point." "I am in first class," Jasmine replied calmly. "Seat 1 Ampere." Kyle looked skeptical. "Do you have your boarding pass?" Jasmine had left it in her seat pocket, not expecting to need it mid-flight. "It's at my seat. I just went to use the restroom in economy because I was told the first-class lavatory is out of order." "Right," Kyle said, unconvinced. "And you're in first class." His tone made it clear he didn't believe her. "Yes, seat 1 Ampere," Jasmine repeated, maintaining her composure despite the growing frustration. "Are you sure you're not the help?" Kyle asked loudly, glancing at other crew members with a smirk. "We don't have any flight attendants matching your description on this route." The cabin fell silent. Several passengers turned to watch the interaction. Jasmine felt heat rising to her face as the humiliation of being publicly questioned washed over her. Bradley, returning from the supposedly malfunctioning lavatory, chuckled as he passed. "She claims she's in 1 Ampere, he stage whispered to another passenger. "Probably snuck up from economy." From his seat, Derek Foster spoke up again. "They're always trying to get something for nothing. Bet she's using someone else's boarding pass." Jasmine stood frozen in the aisle, decades of professional composure warring with the raw indignity of the moment. She'd faced discrimination throughout her career, but rarely so blatant, so public, and so unapologetic. As Kyle continued to block her path, demanding proof of her ticket, Jasmine's hand trembled slightly. A flight attendant passed by with a tray, and when Jasmine reached out to steady herself on a seatback, her elbow accidentally knocked into the tray. The champagne glass that had been sitting there toppled over and shattered on the floor with a crash that seemed to echo through the cabin. "Now look what you've done," Kyle exclaimed, throwing his hands up. "This is exactly why." "I'll need to see what's happening here," came a stern voice from behind. Captain Sullivan had emerged from the cockpit again, his face set in a disapproving frown as he surveyed the scene. "Captain, this woman claims she's in first class and has caused a disruption," Kyle explained, gesturing to the broken glass. Captain Sullivan looked Jasmine up and down his expression, making it clear what he thought of her claim. "Ma'am, have you been drinking today?" The question hit Jasmine like a physical blow. The implication that she was not only out of place, but possibly intoxicated, was the final straw. "No, Captain, I have not," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I am a first-class passenger in seat 1 Ampere. Your flight attendant refused to let me return to my seat because he assumed, based solely on my appearance, that I couldn't possibly belong in first class." Captain Sullivan's expression didn't change. "We're just trying to maintain order on the aircraft, ma'am. If you continue to be disruptive, I'll have no choice but to have security meet us upon arrival in New York." It was in this moment, surrounded by judgmental stares and condescension, that something shifted in Jasmine Washington. The professional mask she'd worn for years cracked, revealing not weakness but a cold, calculated fury. With deliberate movements, she reached for her phone. "I think you all have made a very serious mistake today," she said, her voice low but clear enough for those nearby to hear. She dialed a number from memory, holding the phone to her ear, while maintaining unflinching eye contact with Captain Sullivan. "Michelle, get me the board. Now." Her voice was steel. "I'm buying the whole airline." The absolute certainty in her tone caused a flicker of unease to cross the captain's face. Around her, the mocking smiles began to fade as passengers sensed the shift in power dynamics, though they couldn't yet understand why. Bradley scoffed from his seat. "Oh, please! As if someone like you could afford to buy a pencil from this airline, let alone..." "Yes, I'm still here." Jasmine continued into the phone, ignoring Bradley completely. "Move up the timeline. Today, no more waiting." So what do you think Jasmine is planning? Have you ever witnessed discrimination on a flight? Comment below with your experiences. And if you're enjoying this story of justice in the making, tap that like button and subscribe for more. But first, let's find out what Jasmine meant by buying the whole airline. Jasmine returned to seat 1 Ampere with a new air of calm determination. The captain and flight attendants retreated, confused by her cryptic phone call, but unwilling to escalate the situation further. Bradley continued making snide remarks under his breath, but Jasmine barely registered them now. Her focus had shifted entirely. 2 weeks earlier, in the sleek boardroom of Washington Enterprises headquarters in Chicago, Jasmine had led a meeting that few people knew about. Present were only her most trusted executives and advisors, all bound by strict confidentiality agreements. Atlas Airlines has been underperforming for years, Jasmine had explained, pointing to the financial projections on the screen. Their customer service ratings are abysmal, their fleet is aging, and their corporate culture is stuck in the 1,980 seconds. Yet they have valuable routes and gate assignments that would be nearly impossible to acquire otherwise. Her CFO, Thomas Richards, had nodded in agreement. "We've been quietly purchasing shares for the past 8 months. As of yesterday, we own 47% of the company." "Why not announce the acquisition now?" asked Denise Wong, her chief operating officer. Jasmine had smiled. "Because I want to experience the airline as an ordinary customer first. No special treatment, no executive tours. I want to see how Atlas treats its passengers when they think no one important is watching." The plan had been to finalize the takeover after Jasmine's New York meeting. The board meeting was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, where she would officially become the majority shareholder and assume control of the company. But now, as she sat in her first-class seat with the evidence of discrimination surrounding her, Jasmine had decided to accelerate her timeline. She dialed her executive assistant, Michelle Chen. "Michelle, I need you to move up the Atlas board meeting to tonight," she instructed. "Yes, I know it's unconventional. Use the emergency provisions in their corporate charter. Article 7, Section 3 allows for immediate board meetings in cases of urgent corporate interest." Michelle, ever efficient, didn't waste time questioning the sudden change. "I'll make it happen. Virtual or in person?" "Virtual. I'll be joining from the plane," Jasmine replied. "And Michelle, make sure our legal team is standing by. I've witnessed enough discriminatory behavior today to justify immediate action under the terms of our acquisition agreement." Ending the call, Jasmine opened her laptop and connected to the plane's Wi-Fi, paying the exorbitant fee without a second thought. She accessed the secure server containing all the documents related to the Atlas Airlines acquisition, including the complete employee records she now had legal right to view. Within minutes, she received a calendar invitation for an emergency board meeting of Atlas Airlines, scheduled for 7:00 p.m. Eastern Time, just an hour from now. One by one, confused responses from board members trickled in, accepting the sudden meeting but questioning its purpose. At precisely 7:00 p.m., Jasmine clicked the link to join the video conference. The faces of 12 board members appeared on her screen, along with Atlas's current CEO, Walter Bennett, a 60-year-old white man with a reputation for running the company like a private club. "What is the meaning of this?" Walter demanded, his face reddening when he saw Jasmine. "Who authorized this meeting? And why is Miss Washington attending?" The lead counsel for Washington Enterprises appeared in another window. "Good evening, gentlemen. As you're aware, Washington Enterprises has been acquiring significant shares in Atlas Airlines over the past year. As of 4:30 this afternoon, Miss Washington's final purchase was processed, giving her controlling interest in the company." The board members' faces registered shock, confusion, and in some cases, dawning horror. "This is preposterous," Walter sputtered. "There was no notification, no warning. All legally filed with the SEC, the lawyer continued smoothly. The paperwork is in order. Ms. Washington is now the majority shareholder of Atlas Airlines, effective immediately. Jasmine spoke for the first time, her voice calm but authoritative. Gentlemen, I had planned to assume control more gradually, but circumstances have changed. I am currently a passenger on Atlas Flight 1157 from Atlanta to New York, where I have personally experienced and witnessed discriminatory treatment that violates not only company policy, but federal aviation regulations. She proceeded to detail the events of the flight, the repeated questioning of her presence in first class, the disparate service, the lavatory incident, and finally being publicly accused of stealing someone else's seat and being fanned. Intoxicated. This is not an isolated incident. She continued pulling up the employee records she'd accessed. Flight attendant Melanie Parker has 7 complaints about discriminatory treatment in her file, all dismissed without investigation. Captain Richard Sullivan has a similar pattern, along with several safety violations that were overlooked. The board members shifted uncomfortably. My first act as majority shareholder is to implement immediate changes to Atlas Airlines' customer service protocols and anti-discrimination policies, Jasmine declared. I am also calling for the resignation of CEO Walter Bennett, effective immediately, for fostering a corporate culture that allows such behavior to go unchecked. Walter's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. This is some kind of hostile takeover. No, Mr. Bennett, Jasmine replied coolly. This is accountability. As the reality of the situation sank in the atmosphere, the virtual meeting shifted. Board members who moments ago had been dismissive were now deferential, recognizing the new power dynamics. Miss Washington said one board member who had previously ignored her, "We had no idea these issues existed within our airline. We fully support your efforts to address them." Jasmine's expression remained unchanged. Really? Because these problems have been documented for years in customer complaints, employee reports, and even social media. The information was available to anyone who cared to look. She shared her screen, showing a comprehensive plan she had prepared for transforming Atlas Airlines' corporate culture. This is just the beginning. Atlas will become an industry leader in both service excellence and inclusive practices, or it will be dismantled and sold for parts. The choice is yours, gentlemen. The stunned silence that followed told her everything she needed to know. The board that had allowed discrimination to flourish would either adapt to her vision or be replaced. As the meeting continued, Jasmine was acutely aware of her surroundings on the plane. The flight attendants had noticed her focused work and intense conversation, though they couldn't hear the details. Melanie had made a half-hearted attempt to approach her. "Miss Washington, I wanted to apologize for any misunderstandings earlier," she had said, her smile strained. Jasmine had acknowledged her with professional courtesy, but made detailed notes of the interaction in her document titled Personnel Changes Phase 1. Now, as the board meeting concluded with the shocked directors agreeing to her demands, Jasmine felt a grim satisfaction. The airline that had treated her as less than human would now answer to her. Have you ever witnessed someone being discriminated against and wished you could do something about it? Comment 1 if you believe Jasmine was right to take immediate control of the airline after experiencing discrimination firsthand. Hit the like button if you're enjoying watching justice unfold in real time, and subscribe to see more stories of people standing up against injustice. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Let me know in the comments below. Now let's see what plans Jasmine has in store for this airline. With still 2 hours remaining before their scheduled landing at JFK, Jasmine's fingers flew across her keyboard. The emergency board meeting had confirmed her as the controlling shareholder of Atlas Airlines, and she wasn't wasting a single minute. Her first email went directly to Walter Bennett's corporate account, with the entire executive team copied. "Mr. Bennett, please ensure you are present at Gate B17 upon our arrival. We have urgent matters to discuss regarding the future of Atlas Airlines." Bring your chief of human resources and legal counsel." She knew Walter would be fuming, but powerless to refuse. The board had made it clear Jasmine Washington was now in charge. Her next task was to thoroughly document every discriminatory incident she'd experienced during the flight. She created a detailed timeline noting names, times, and specific actions, all organized into a formal report. What many people didn't know about Jasmine was that before becoming a CEO, she had practiced law for 5 years, specializing in corporate compliance and discrimination cases. Her legal background made her especially dangerous to those who had mistreated her today. Using her new access to the Atlas Airlines employee database, Jasmine began researching the crew members who had discriminated against her. She wasn't surprised by what she found. Captain Richard Sullivan had been with Atlas for 22 years. His personnel file contained multiple passenger complaints about rude or dismissive behavior, particularly toward women and minorities. All had been marked resolved, with no disciplinary action. More concerning were the 3 safety violations in the past 5 years, all quietly handled with minimal consequences due to his connections with upper management and his friendship with Walter Bennett, his former college roommate. Melanie Parker had similar issues in her 10-year employment history. 8 formal complaints from passengers about discriminatory treatment, all dismissed as misunderstandings. Her performance reviews consistently praised her ability to maintain the exclusive atmosphere of first class, a phrase that Jasmine now understood as coded language for keeping out those deemed unworthy. Kyle Brooks was newer, only 2 years with the airline, but already had 3 complaints. In each case, he had been defended by senior flight attendants, including Melanie, who had taken him under her wing. Jasmine also discovered something interesting about Bradley Thompson. He wasn't just any executive from a competing airline. He was Skyline Airways' Vice President of Competitive Intelligence. His job literally involved gathering information about rival airlines, which explained his frequent first-class flights on Atlas and the preferential treatment he received from crew members who knew his position. Jasmine wondered how many corporate secrets had been exchanged during those friendly drinks with Captain Sullivan that he'd mentioned. At minimum, it represented a serious conflict of interest. At worst, it could constitute corporate espionage. As she compiled this information, Jasmine drafted a comprehensive plan for anti-bias training across Atlas Airlines' entire workforce. The program would be mandatory for all employees, from baggage handlers to executives. She outlined a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior with clear consequences and transparent reporting procedures. She also created a new company policy regarding equal treatment of all passengers, regardless of race, gender, appearance, or any other characteristic. The policy was straightforward. Every passenger who purchases a ticket on Atlas Airlines is entitled to the full service experience of their chosen class, delivered with respect and courtesy. Any employee found to provide disparate treatment based on protected characteristics will face immediate disciplinary action up to and including termination. Jasmine's attention to detail was meticulous. By the time she finished documenting and planning, she had created a roadmap for transforming Atlas Airlines from a company with a discriminatory culture to an industry leader in inclusion and respect. While she worked, the flight experienced another bout of turbulence. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some minor chop." But Jasmine, who had flown millions of miles in her business career, recognized that this wasn't minor turbulence. She accessed the weather report through her corporate weather service subscription, confirming her suspicions. They were flying through a significant weather system that had been forecasted well in advance. A competent flight crew would have requested a different routing or altitude to avoid it. She sent a message to Atlas Airlines Operations Center using her new authority to request information about Sullivan's flight record. The response was illuminating. Sullivan had multiple incidents of flying through forecasted weather systems rather than going around them. prioritizing on-time arrival and fuel savings over passenger comfort and potentially safety. These incidents had been noted, but never addressed another example of the company's lax approach to accountability. Jasmine added this to her growing file of issues to address. As the plane continued toward New York through choppy air, the dynamics in the first-class cabin had shifted subtly. Kyle continued providing subpar service, still unaware of Jasmine's identity and new position. But some passengers who had witnessed her confident phone calls and focused work were beginning to wonder if there was more to this woman in seat 1 Ampere than they had initially assumed. Bradley, however, had become increasingly intoxicated and belligerent. On his 5th scotch of the flight, his comments had grown more openly racist. "You know," he said loudly to a seatmate, though clearly intended for Jasmine to hear, "when I started in this industry, you knew who belonged in first class. Now they let anyone in if they can afford the ticket." Dilutes the whole experience, if you ask me. When Jasmine continued working without acknowledging his comment, Bradley became agitated. He called over Melanie. "Is there any possibility of moving my seat?" he asked, not bothering to lower his voice. The atmosphere in this section has become uncomfortable. Melanie immediately turned to Jasmine. "Miss Washington, would you be willing to move to another seat in first class to accommodate Mr. Thompson?" The absurdity of being asked to give up her seat to appease a racist passenger might have been amusing in other circumstances. As it was, Jasmine merely looked up from her laptop with an expression of cool assessment. "No, I will not," she replied calmly. "I purchased seat 1 Ampere, and that's where I'll remain for the duration of this flight." Bradley's face reddened. "Now see here," he sputtered. "I'm a Platinum Elite member with over 1,000,000 miles on Atlas. I think I deserve some consideration." "Mr. Thompson," Jasmine replied, her voice steady. "Your status with the airline doesn't entitle you to displace other passengers from their assigned seats, particularly when your request is motivated by discriminatory attitudes." Bradley turned to Melanie, expecting support. "Are you going to let her talk to me like that? Do something." The situation escalated until Captain Sullivan was called from the cockpit once again. He assessed the scene with obvious bias, automatically assuming Jasmine was the problem. "Ma'am," he said sternly, "if you continue to cause disruptions, I will have no choice but to have security meet this aircraft when we land." Jasmine closed her laptop and looked directly at Captain Sullivan. "I strongly suggest you check your company email before making threats you cannot follow through on," Captain Sullivan. Something in her tone gave Sullivan pause. For the first time, he seemed to consider that there might be more to this passenger than he had assumed. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Jasmine simply smiled. "You'll understand very soon." As the plane began its initial descent toward New York, the cabin crew prepared for landing. The earlier turbulence had intensified, causing the aircraft to bounce and shudder through rough air. Several passengers looked nervous, gripping their armrests during particularly strong jolts. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the intercom, unnaturally casual given the conditions. "Folks, we're beginning our descent into JFK International Airport. We've got a bit of weather to work through, but it's nothing this bird can't handle. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for arrival." Jasmine, who had been monitoring the weather on her phone, knew the situation was more serious than Sullivan was letting on. A significant storm system had developed over the New York metropolitan area, with wind shear reported by other aircraft. Most airlines were diverting to Philadelphia or Boston, but Atlas Flight 1157 continued toward JFK. She accessed the Atlas Airlines operations system through her new executive credentials, reviewing the communications between the flight and dispatch. The company had advised Sullivan of the deteriorating conditions and offered him the option to divert, but he had declined, citing his experience and familiarity with JFK approaches. Jasmine messaged Atlas's director of flight operations directly. "Please provide Captain Sullivan's complete flight record, including all safety incidents and passenger complaints. Priority urgent." The response came quickly with a detailed file attached. What she read confirmed her suspicions. Sullivan had multiple incidents in his record where he had made questionable decisions regarding weather, all in the name of maintaining on-time performance, a metric that affected his bonus compensation. In several cases, these decisions had resulted in unnecessarily rough flights and at least one injury when a flight attendant fell during unexpected turbulence. More concerning, Sullivan had connections in upper management that had shielded him from consequences. His college roommate was not only CEO Walter Bennett, but also the brother-in-law of the former director of flight operations, creating a clear conflict of interest in how his incidents were handled. As Jasmine reviewed this information, Kyle approached her seat with the barely concealed contempt that had characterized his service throughout the flight. Electronic devices need to be stowed for landing. He instructed, his tone suggesting he expected resistance. Of course, Jasmine replied, saving her documents before shutting down her laptop. She noted that Bradley was still using his tablet, but Kyle made no move to address this discrepancy. The plane hit another patch of rough air, dropping suddenly before recovering. A few passengers gasped, and someone in the back let out a frightened cry. Bradley, who had consumed at least 6 drinks during the 5-hour flight, unbuckled his seatbelt and stood unsteadily. "I need to use the bathroom." "Sir, you need to remain seated with your seatbelt fastened," Kyle said, rushing to his side. "We're experiencing turbulence and preparing for landing." "Do you know who I am?" Bradley slurred. "I'm a VP at Skyline. I practically own this airline." He turned to glare at Jasmine. Unlike some people who don't belong here, Jasmine remained silent, watching as the drunk executive continued making a scene. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who had questioned her presence in first class was now the one disrupting the cabin. "Sir, please sit down," Kyle insisted, now genuinely concerned about safety. "Not until she moves," Bradley pointed at Jasmine. "I don't want to sit next to her kind." The open racism silenced the cabin. Even passengers who had previously ignored or tacitly supported the discriminatory treatment looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Thompson," Kyle said, lowering his voice, "please return to your seat. We can discuss other arrangements once we're safely on the ground." "Move her," Bradley demanded, his voice rising. "She doesn't belong here." Melanie hurried over from the galley. "Bradley," she said, using his first name with inappropriate familiarity, "let's get you seated. I promise we'll sort this out once we land." "Is there a problem?" Jasmine asked, calmly, looking directly at Melanie. "No problem at all, Miss Washington," Melanie replied nervously. "Mr. Thompson is just a bit uncomfortable with the seating arrangement." "And you're considering moving me to accommodate his racial discomfort?" Jasmine clarified, her voice level, but with an edge that made Melanie flinch. "I didn't say that." Melanie backpedaled. "We're just trying to keep everyone happy." Everyone? Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Or just the white male executive who's clearly intoxicated and creating a safety hazard during a turbulent approach? The plane dropped again, more violently this time. Bradley lost his balance, falling back into his seat. The captain's voice came over the intercom, tension now evident. "Flight attendants, take your seats immediately. We're experiencing severe turbulence on approach." Melanie and Kyle rushed to their jump seats as the plane bucked through rough air. Jasmine calmly fastened her seatbelt, noting that Bradley was struggling with his carder, his coordination impaired by alcohol. Without a word, she reached over and secured his seatbelt for him. He was too startled and perhaps too frightened by the increasingly rough flight to protest. The turbulence worsened as they descended through the storm. Rain lashed the windows and lightning flashed outside, illuminating the darkened cabin in brief, stark bursts. The plane shuddered and bucked, dropping suddenly before being caught by another air current. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some significant weather on approach. I've turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. Everyone must remain seated with seatbelts securely fastened." Crew, secure the cabin and yourselves immediately." Jasmine checked her phone one last time before stowing it, noting that most other flights had indeed diverted away from JFK due to the dangerous conditions. Sullivan's decision to continue the approach was questionable at best and reckless at worst. The plane emerged from the clouds on final approach, the runway lights barely visible through sheets of rain. Despite the dangerous conditions, Sullivan managed to execute a firm but safe landing, the tires squealing on the wet runway as the aircraft decelerated rapidly. As soon as the plane reached the gate and the seatbelt sign turned off, Sullivan emerged from the cockpit, his face flushed with the adrenaline of the challenging landing. He nodded to Bradley and a few other regular passengers before making his way toward Jasmine's seat. "Miss Washington," he began, his tone falsely conciliatory, "I understand there were some misunderstandings during our flight today." "Were there?" Jasmine replied coolly. "Look," Sullivan continued, lowering his voice, "we all want to avoid unpleasantness. I'm sure we can resolve any issues without involving airport security or further escalation." Jasmine looked at him thoughtfully. "You might want to check your company email before continuing this conversation, Captain Sullivan." Sullivan frowned, pulling out his phone. As he scrolled through his messages, his expression changed from confusion to disbelief and finally to dread. He looked up at Jasmine, truly seeing her for the first time. You're the new majority shareholder," he stammered. "I am Jasmine, confirmed, and I believe we have some serious matters to discuss regarding your performance today, both as a captain and as a representative of Atlas Airlines." Sullivan's face paled. "Miss Washington, I had no idea." Clearly, Jasmine cut him off. "And that's precisely the problem, isn't it? Because had you known who I was, you would have treated me with respect. The fact that you didn't know shouldn't have mattered." Around them, other crew members were checking their devices, the news of the ownership change spreading rapidly throughout the company. Melanie and Kyle stood frozen in the galley, their faces reflecting growing horror as they realized the gravity of their actions. Bradley, still oblivious to the dramatic shift in power dynamics, pushed past Sullivan. "Richard, are you really going to let her talk to you like that? Who does she think she is?" Sullivan couldn't meet his eyes. "She's the new owner of Atlas Airlines, Brad." Bradley's smug expression collapsed. "What?" Miss Washington now holds controlling interest in Atlas. Sullivan repeated each word, clearly painful, effective immediately. The color drained from Bradley's face as the implications of his behavior throughout the flight dawned on him. I was just... You were just revealing your true character," Mr. Thompson. Jasmine finished for him. "As were all of you." Her gaze swept over Sullivan, Melanie, and Kyle. "And now we'll see the consequences of those revelations." As passengers began to disembark, whispers spread through the cabin. The woman in 1 Ampere, the one who had been treated so dismissively, now owned the entire airline. The story was already spreading to other parts of the plane, passengers pulling out phones to search for news about Atlas Airlines and Jasmine Washington. Jasmine remained seated, allowing others to depart first. She had one more call to make before leaving the aircraft. "Michelle." "Yes, we've landed. Is everything in place?" She listened briefly. "Perfect. And the HR team is waiting." "Excellent." She ended the call and finally stood gathering her belongings with unhurried precision. As she made her way toward the exit, crew members who had ignored her for 5 hours now scrambled to appear attentive and respectful. At the aircraft door, Jasmine paused and turned to Captain Sullivan, who stood nearby with a sickly expression. "Captain, I suggest you join me at Gate B-17. We have some urgent matters to discuss regarding your employment with Atlas Airlines." As passengers streamed into the terminal at JFK, word of what had happened aboard Flight 1157 spread like wildfire. Those who had witnessed the discrimination firsthand recounted the story to others, embellishing details and speculating about what would happen next. In the digital age, news traveled fast. Several passengers were already posting about the incident on social media. Meanwhile, the flight crew gathered in the galley, frantically checking their company devices. Emergency notifications had been sent to all Atlas employees about the change in ownership, though few details were provided beyond the fact that Washington Enterprises had acquired controlling interest in the airline. Captain Sullivan read the message for the third time, his hands visibly shaking. "This can't be happening," he muttered more to himself than to his colleagues. Melanie nervously twisted her hands together. "Richard, what do we do? I didn't know. We didn't know who she was." "That's exactly the problem," Kyle interjected, suddenly understanding the gravity of the situation. "We shouldn't have treated her that way, regardless of who she was." Sullivan shot him a withering look. "Now you develop a conscience," after calling her the help. Melanie checked her company phone again, scrolling through a new message that had just arrived. They're calling an emergency staff meeting. All crew members from this flight are to report to Conference Room C immediately after deplaning. "This is just a misunderstanding," Sullivan insisted, trying to convince himself as much as the others. "I'm friends with Walter. He'll smooth this over." Kyle looked skeptical. "I don't think the CEO can override the owner, Richard." As the reality of their situation sank, the crew members fell silent, each contemplating the consequences of their actions. They had treated a passenger with contempt and discrimination, only to discover she was now their boss with the power to determine their professional futures. In the main cabin, Bradley Thompson remained seated long after the other passengers had deplaned. His face was ashen, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. As a VP at a competing airline who had been openly discriminatory toward the new owner of Atlas, he understood better than most how precarious his position had become. When he finally rose to leave, Bradley found Jasmine waiting for him at the aircraft door. "Mr. Thompson," she said coolly, "a moment of your time, please." He swallowed hard. "Miss Washington, I want to apologize for any misunderstandings during our flight. I had no idea that I was wealthy and powerful." Jasmine finished for him. "Yes, that's becoming quite clear. Your behavior changes dramatically based on what you perceive someone's status to be. That's not an admirable quality in anyone, let alone an executive." Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "I never meant to." "Yes, you did," Jasmine interrupted. "Every word, every action was precisely what you meant. You believed there would be no consequences because you assumed I had no power to hold you accountable. That was your mistake." She gestured to two men in suits who had appeared in the jetway behind her. "These gentlemen are from my security team. They'll escort you to a private meeting room where representatives from my legal department are waiting to discuss your conduct today, as well as the potentially illegal sharing of corporate intelligence between you and Captain Sullivan." Bradley's face drained of what little color remained. That's ridiculous. We were just friends catching up." "We'll see what your employers at Skyline Airways think about that explanation," Jasmine replied. "I've already spoken with their CEO, who was quite disturbed to learn about your behavior today. It seems they have strict policies about how executives represent the company while traveling." As Bradley was led away, Jasmine proceeded into the terminal. The regular hustle and bustle of JFK surrounded her, but there was an unusual concentration of activity at Gate B-17. A group of nervous-looking executives in suits stood clustered together, including Walter Bennett, whose face was fixed in an expression of barely contained panic. Beside them stood Michelle Chen, Jasmine's executive assistant, along with Marcus Johnson, her trusted COO, and several members of Washington Enterprises' legal team. Their calm professional demeanor contrasted sharply with the anxiety radiating from the Atlas executives. As Jasmine approached, Walter stepped forward, attempting a smile that came across as more of a grimace. "Miss Washington, welcome to New York." I understand there's been some confusion. There's no confusion, Mr. Bennett, Jasmine cut him off. What happened on that flight was crystal clear, as was your company's long-standing culture of tolerating discriminatory behavior. Walter flushed. I assure you, Atlas Airlines has strict policies against discrimination. If there was an incident, it was an isolated. Stop, Jasmine held up her hand. Don't compound the problem by lying to me. I've already accessed your company's records and found numerous complaints about the exact same behavior I experienced today, all dismissed without proper investigation. She turned to address the gathered executives. For those who don't know me, I'm Jasmine Washington, CEO of Washington Enterprises, and as of 4:30 this afternoon, the majority shareholder of Atlas Airlines. I had planned to experience your airline as a regular customer before announcing the acquisition. What I discovered was a culture of discrimination so deeply embedded that it's clearly sanctioned from the top down. The executives exchanged nervous glances as Jasmine continued. I witnessed firsthand how Atlas treats passengers who don't fit your preconceived notions of who belongs in first class. I experienced discriminatory service, harassment, and public humiliation from multiple staff members, culminating in being accused of theft and intoxication by your captain. Walter attempted to interject, but Jasmine silenced him with a look. Even more concerning, I discovered safety violations that were overlooked, customer complaints that were ignored, and a pattern of preferential treatment for certain passengers that potentially constitutes corporate espionage. She gestured to her legal team. My attorneys have prepared detailed documentation of everything I witnessed today, along with the historical evidence of similar incidents. We'll be reviewing this with each of you individually. The flight crew emerged from the jetway led by Captain Sullivan. They froze when they saw the gathering, suddenly understanding that this was far more serious than a typical customer complaint. Sullivan's eyes darted between Jasmine and Walter, clearly hoping his friend would intervene on his behalf. But Walter avoided his gaze, already calculating how to save his own position. Jasmine addressed the crew directly. Captain Sullivan, Miss Parker, Mr. Brooks, you are all being placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation into your conduct today. Security will escort you to HR for preliminary interviews, after which you'll be required to surrender your company credentials until the investigation concludes. Melanie stepped forward, her voice quavering. Miss Washington, please, I have children to support. I can't lose this job. You should have considered that before participating in the systematic mistreatment of passengers based on their race, Jasmine replied not unkindly but firmly. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, Miss Parker. That's not a privilege reserved for those who look a certain way or hold certain positions. As security personnel led the crew members away, Jasmine turned her attention back to the executives. Now shall we discuss the future of Atlas Airlines? The group moved to a private conference room where Jasmine presented evidence of the systematic discrimination within the company. She pulled up records showing dozens of similar complaints, all dismissed or minimized by management. This isn't just morally wrong, she explained, her voice steady and authoritative. It's legally indefensible and commercially suicidal. In today's world, companies cannot afford to alienate entire demographics of potential customers through discriminatory practices. She displayed a comprehensive transformation plan on the room's large screen, one she had prepared weeks ago but refined during the flight, based on her personal experience. Atlas will undergo a complete restructuring, beginning with leadership, she announced. Mr. Bennett, I'm offering you a choice. You can implement these changes under close supervision, or you can tender your resignation, effective immediately. Walter, seeing the writing on the wall, opted for the latter. I'll resign, he said stiffly. But I expect my full severance package, as outlined in my contract. Jasmine's lawyer stepped forward. Actually, Mr. Bennett, the morality clause in your contract may affect that package given the evidence we've uncovered. We'll be reviewing that in detail. As Walter absorbed this blow, Jasmine turned to the remaining executives. I'm appointing Marcus Johnson as interim CEO to oversee this transition. Those of you who embrace our new vision of inclusive excellence are welcome to remain with the company. Those who cannot adapt should follow Mr. Bennett's example and resign. She glanced at her watch. I have another meeting to attend, but Mr. Johnson will continue this discussion and begin implementing our immediate action items. I expect a progress report by tomorrow morning. As Jasmine prepared to leave, one of the Atlas board members who had flown in for the emergency meeting approached her. Miss Washington, he said quietly, I just wanted to say, what happened to you on that flight was inexcusable. I'm truly sorry. Jasmine studied him for a moment. Thank you for the sentiment, but I'm more interested in actions than apologies. Will you support the changes we're implementing? Absolutely, he nodded. It's long overdue. Then we have a foundation to build on, Jasmine replied. She gathered her belongings and headed for the door, pausing briefly to look back at the room of executives still trying to process the seismic shift that had occurred in their company. One last thing, she added. Atlas Airlines will be issuing a public statement tomorrow, acknowledging the incident on today's flight and outlining our commitment to transforming our corporate culture. We will own our mistakes and be transparent about our path forward. With that, Jasmine exited the room, leaving behind a group of executives with the dawning realization that the era of discrimination being tolerated at Atlas Airlines had come to an abrupt and decisive end. 6 weeks after the fateful flight from Atlanta to New York, the headquarters of Atlas Airlines buzzed with a new energy. Gone were the dark wood paneling and dated furnishings that had characterized Walter Bennett's tenure. The executive floor now featured glass walls and an open concept design, a physical manifestation of the transparency Jasmine Washington had demanded throughout the company. In a spacious conference room overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Jasmine presided over a meeting with the newly restructured executive team. Marcus Johnson, who had transitioned from interim to permanent CEO, sat at her right hand. To her left was Denise Wong, who had moved from Washington Enterprises to become Atlas's new Chief Operating Officer. The customer satisfaction numbers for May are announced the new Chief Customer Officer, presenting a graph on the large screen. We're up 27% since the implementation of our new service protocols. Jasmine nodded approvingly. And employee feedback? Overwhelmingly positive, replied the head of human resources, a new hire with extensive experience in corporate culture transformation. The mandatory anti-bias training was initially met with resistance from some departments, but the follow-up surveys indicate a significant shift in understanding and commitment. What about the incidents report? Jasmine asked, referring to the new system for tracking and addressing discriminatory behavior. We've seen a 40% increase in reporting, the HR director explained, which was expected as employees become more comfortable with the system. But the repeat incident rate has dropped by 63%, suggesting the training is having its intended effect. Marcus Johnson added, the financial markets have responded positively as well. Atlas stock is up 17% since the announcement of our Culture Transformation Initiative. Jasmine allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The changes she had implemented were already bearing fruit. Though she knew the work of truly transforming a corporate culture was a marathon, not a sprint. And what about our former employees? She asked, turning to the legal representative present. The attorney consulted her notes. Captain Sullivan accepted early retirement rather than face the disciplinary hearing. His commercial pilot's license is under review by the FAA due to the safety violations we reported. Jasmine had insisted on transparency with regulatory agencies about the safety concerns she had uncovered, believing that accountability was necessary for genuine change. Melanie Parker completed the sensitivity training program and has accepted a position in our customer service call center where her interactions can be monitored and evaluated. She's on a 6-month probationary period. This had been a difficult decision for Jasmine. While she believed in consequences, she also believed in second chances for those willing to learn and change. Melanie had seemed genuinely remorseful during her disciplinary hearing and had young children to support. Jasmine had authorized her reassignment to a position where she could prove her commitment to the company's new values. Kyle Brooks has not sought reinstatement, the attorney continued. He's currently working for a regional carrier in the Midwest. The meeting continued with updates on various aspects of the transformation plan. When it concluded, the executives filed out, leaving Jasmine alone with Marcus and Denise. "You've accomplished more in 6 weeks than most companies do in 6 years, Marcus observed. "The industry is taking notice." "It's just the beginning," Jasmine replied. "Real change takes time and consistent effort. We need to maintain this momentum." Denise handed her a tablet displaying recent news articles about Atlas Airlines. The headlines ranged from "Corporate Culture Revolution at Atlas" to "How one black executive transformed an airline overnight." "The media narrative has been overwhelmingly positive," Denise noted, "though some outlets are questioning whether one incident can justify such sweeping changes." Jasmine handed the tablet back with a knowing look. It wasn't one incident. It was thousands of incidents experienced by countless passengers over years. I just happened to be the one with the power to do something about it. Later that afternoon, Jasmine attended a different kind of meeting. In a community center in the Bronx, she sat with a diverse group of former passengers who had experienced discrimination on Atlas flights. The company had reached out to everyone who had filed complaints over the past 5 years, inviting them to participate in focus groups to help shape the airline's new approach to customer service. "I never expected to hear from the airline again after my complaint was dismissed," said an elderly black woman who had been denied assistance with her luggage, while white passengers received help. "When I got your letter, I thought it was a joke." "It's no joke," Mrs. Taylor Jasmine assured her. "Your experiences matter, and they're helping us build a better company." A Latino man shared his story of being repeatedly questioned about his first-class ticket, despite being a frequent business traveler. A Muslim family described being subjected to additional random screening every time they flew. A transgender passenger recounted being humiliated by staff who refused to honor their gender identity. Jasmine listened to each story with genuine concern, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. These testimonials would inform the next phase of Atlas's transformation, a comprehensive review of every customer touchpoint to identify and eliminate opportunities for bias. After the focus group concluded, Jasmine was approached by a reporter who had been granted permission to observe the session. "Miss Washington, you've initiated a complete overhaul of Atlas Airlines based on your personal experience of discrimination. Some critics are calling it an overreaction or a vendetta. How do you respond?" Jasmine considered her answer carefully. "What happened to me was not unique or isolated. It was simply the most visible example of a pervasive problem. The stories you heard today confirm that. This isn't about vengeance. It's about creating an airline where everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance or background." "And what about the employees who were disciplined or terminated?" "Some have claimed they were scapegoats for systemic issues. Everyone was given the opportunity to acknowledge their mistakes and commit to our new standards," Jasmine explained. "Those who chose not to do so made their own decisions about their futures with Atlas. We're focused now on building a culture where such behavior is neither tolerated nor rewarded." As Jasmine left the community center, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an update on Bradley Thompson, the Skyline Airways executive who had been so disdainful during the flight. Following their meeting at JFK, Jasmine's legal team had presented evidence of Bradley's inappropriate behavior to Skyline's CEO, along with concerns about potential corporate espionage based on his relationship with Captain Sullivan. After an internal investigation, Skyline had terminated Bradley's employment for violations of their code of conduct and ethics policies. The notification informed Jasmine that Bradley had filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Skyline, claiming he was fired due to pressure from Washington Enterprises. Skyline's legal department had responded by releasing the video deposition from their internal investigation in which Bradley had admitted to making racist comments and discussing sensitive company information with Sullivan. The lawsuit had been dismissed, and Bradley was now reportedly working as a sales representative for a small charter company effectively blacklisted from major airlines. Jasmine felt no satisfaction in Bradley's downfall, only a sense that accountability had been served. His actions had consequences, just as Atlas Airlines was now facing the consequences of years of enabling discriminatory behavior. That evening, Jasmine returned to her penthouse apartment with a view of Central Park. As she kicked off her shoes and poured herself a glass of wine, she reflected on how much had changed in just 6 weeks. The incident on Flight 1157 had accelerated her timeline but not altered her fundamental plan. She had always intended to transform Atlas Airlines into an industry leader in both service excellence and inclusive practices. The discrimination she'd experienced had simply made the need for change more personal and urgent. Her phone rang. It was her mother calling from Chicago. "I saw you on the news again," her mother said proudly after they exchanged greetings. "My baby changing the world, one airline at a time." Jasmine laughed. "Hardly the world, Mom. Just one company with a lot of room for improvement." "Don't downplay it," her mother chided gently. "What you're doing matters. Every time someone like us can fly without being treated like we don't belong, that's a victory." After they hung up, Jasmine walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights. Her mother was right, these changes mattered. Not just for her or the passengers in the focus group, but for everyone who had ever felt the sting of being judged by their appearance rather than their character. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in the ongoing transformation of Atlas Airlines. There would be resistance to overcome, systems to redesign, and a corporate culture to rebuild. But tonight, Jasmine allowed herself to savor the progress already made and to imagine the possibilities that lay ahead. 1 year after Jasmine Washington's fateful flight from Atlanta to New York, Atlas Airlines hosted a press conference at its newly redesigned headquarters. The company had undergone a complete metamorphosis, emerging as an unexpected industry leader in both customer satisfaction and workplace culture. The sleek auditorium was filled with journalists, industry analysts, and employees as Jasmine took the stage alongside Marcus Johnson, the CEO who had successfully implemented her vision. 1 year ago today, Jasmine began boarded an Atlas Airlines flight as an ordinary passenger and experienced discrimination that was unfortunately all too common for many travelers. Today, I'm proud to announce that Atlas has achieved the highest customer satisfaction scores in its history with a 92% approval rating across all demographic groups. Applause filled the room as Marcus stepped forward to present the detailed metrics. This transformation wasn't just about addressing isolated incidents, he explained. It required reimagining our entire approach to customer service, employee training, and corporate accountability. The presentation highlighted the company's achievements over the past year, a comprehensive anti-bias training program completed by all 22,000 employees, a new customer feedback system that specifically tracked equitable treatment, and a transparent disciplinary process that held staff at all levels accountable for discriminatory behavior. The financial results speak for themselves. Marcus continued displaying a graph showing Atlas's stock performance over the past year, a steady upward trajectory that had outperformed the industry average by 23%. When we treat all customers with dignity and respect, everyone benefits, passengers, employees, and shareholders alike. As the press conference continued, the cameras occasionally panned to the audience, capturing the reactions of various stakeholders. In the front row sat some familiar faces from Flight 1157 now, in very different circumstances. Bradley Thompson watched the proceedings from a small apartment in Phoenix, where he had relocated after failing to secure employment with any major airline. The video of his deposition had gone viral, effectively ending his career in the industry he had once dominated. He had recently taken a position teaching aviation management at a community college, a humbling change from his former executive status, but one that allowed him to support himself while reflecting on the choices that had led to his Cleve's downfall. Captain Richard Sullivan had taken early retirement rather than adapt to Atlas's new culture. He now worked as a flight instructor at a small regional school teaching technical skills while deliberately avoiding any mentorship role. The FAA investigation into his safety violations had resulted in restrictions on his commercial license, limiting the types of aircraft he could operate. The experience had been humbling, forcing him to confront the preferential treatment that had shielded him from consequences throughout his career. Melanie Parker sat in the audience wearing an Atlas Airlines uniform, though not the one she had worn a year ago. After completing sensitivity training and a 6-month probationary period in the call center, she had applied for a position with the company's new Customer Experience Team, a group specifically tasked with ensuring equitable treatment for all passengers. To everyone's surprise, including her own, she had excelled in the role, bringing valuable perspective on how unconscious bias could affect service delivery. Her transformation had been featured in the company newsletter as an example of personal growth and second chances. The most unexpected attendee was Kyle Brooks. After leaving Atlas, he had struggled to find comparable employment, eventually taking a customer service job outside the airline industry. The experience of being on the other side of the service interaction had been eye-opening, helping him recognize patterns in his own behavior. 6 months ago, he had reached out to Jasmine directly with a sincere apology and a request for a second chance. After careful consideration, she had approved his rehiring on a probationary basis. Today, he worked in Atlas's training department, sharing his personal journey as a cautionary tale for new employees. As the formal presentation concluded, Jasmine unveiled Atlas's newest initiative, a scholarship program for underprivileged youth interested in aviation careers. The first recipient, a young black woman from Chicago's South Side, the same neighborhood where Jasmine had grown up, was invited to the stage to be recognized. Tiana Johnson represents the future of aviation, Jasmine announced. A future where talent and determination matter more than appearance or background. Atlas Airlines is committed to creating pathways for students like Tiana to succeed in this industry. The press conference transitioned to a Q&A session with journalists eager to understand the details of Atlas's transformation. Miss Washington asked a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, "Many companies implement diversity initiatives that fade away over time. How have you ensured that these changes will be permanent?" By tying them directly to our business model, Jasmine replied confidently, "This isn't a separate diversity program. It's integrated into every aspect of our operations, from hiring practices to performance metrics to compensation structures. Treating all customers with respect isn't just the right thing to do. It's proven to be profitable." Another journalist inquired about resistance to the changes. Surely not everyone within the company embraced this new direction. How did you handle opposition? Marcus fielded this question. "We were transparent about our expectations. Those who couldn't or wouldn't adapt had choices to make about their future with Atlas. But the majority of our employees embraced the opportunity to be part of something better. They've become our most passionate advocates." After the press conference, Jasmine boarded an Atlas flight for her return to Chicago, where she would visit her mother. Unlike a year ago, she made no effort to travel incognito. Her face was now well known throughout the company. "Welcome aboard," Miss Washington greeted the flight attendant at the door with the same warm professionalism shown to every passenger. It's an honor to have you flying with us today." Jasmine took her seat in 1 Ampere, the same seat assignment she'd had on that transformative flight a year ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on her or the crew, many of whom had specifically requested to work this flight to demonstrate how much had changed. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Jasmine observed the interactions around her. The diverse passengers in first class received equally attentive service. In the row behind her, an elderly black couple was treated with the same deference as the white executives across the aisle. A Muslim family with young children was offered assistance with their bags without hesitation. These small interactions represented the real success of Atlas's transformation. Not the press conferences or the improved stock price, but the everyday dignity afforded to every passenger, regardless of their appearance. The captain's voice came over the intercom, a woman part of Atlas's initiative to increase diversity in the cockpit. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Atlas Airlines Flight 1157 from New York to Chicago. We're honored to have our majority shareholder, Jasmine Washington, on board with us today." A spontaneous round of applause broke out among passengers who recognized the significance of the moment. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Jasmine gazed out the window at the expansive operations of the airline she now controlled. Her mind drifted back to her mother's words, spoken to her repeatedly throughout her childhood. "They'll never see you coming until you own the sky they fly in." How prophetic those words had proven to be. What had begun as a routine business acquisition accelerated by a personal experience of discrimination had transformed not just one company, but potentially an entire industry. Other airlines were already implementing similar initiatives, recognizing the competitive advantage Atlas had gained through its inclusive approach. The plane lifted off smoothly, climbing into clear blue skies. Below, the Manhattan skyline receded, giving way to a broader perspective of the landscape. Similarly, what had started as one woman's response to mistreatment had expanded into something much larger, a blueprint for corporate transformation that prioritized dignity and respect alongside profitability. In the years since that fateful flight, Washington Enterprises had continued its strategic growth, acquiring interests in other transportation companies. Jasmine's vision extended beyond airlines to railroads, shipping lines, and ground transportation services. Each acquisition followed the same pattern: experience the service as an ordinary customer, identify opportunities for improvement, and implement changes that benefited all stakeholders. As Atlas Flight 1157 reached cruising altitude, Jasmine opened her laptop to review plans for her next acquisition. On the screen was a confidential prospectus for a major cruise line known for its exclusive atmosphere and, according to customer reviews, occasional issues with discriminatory treatment. Jasmine smiled to herself. Perhaps it was time to book a vacation. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Would you have handled the situation differently? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and transformation, please hit the like button. Subscribe to our Taiman channel for more inspiring content and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks. Jasmine Washington's story teaches us that true change often requires both power and purpose. While discrimination affects countless individuals daily, most lack the resources to create systemic change. Jasmine used her unique position not for revenge, but transformation, turning a personal slight into institutional reform. The lesson isn't that we must all become CEOs to fight discrimination, but rather that we should leverage whatever influence we have to create positive change in our spheres. The story also illustrates how bias operates regardless of status. Even in first class wearing designer clothes, Jasmine faced assumptions based solely on her race. This reveals the insidious nature of prejudice. It ignores achievements, credentials, and character. Perhaps most importantly, the narrative demonstrates the business case for inclusion. Atlas Airlines became more profitable by treating all customers with dignity. When companies view equity not as charity but as strategic advantage, transformation becomes sustainable. Real change happens when doing the right thing aligns with doing the profitable thing. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could make a difference? What small actions can we take in our daily lives to create more inclusive environments? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice and transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps more people see these important messages. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge perspectives and inspire positive change. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, sharing is caring. Thank you for joining us today. Remember, you don't need to own an airline to make a difference. Sometimes standing firm in your worth and speaking truth to power is where transformation begins.